And I'll pause the recording. All right, now that we're recording. So again, excited to introduce Dennis O'Connell of Taylor Business Group. So Dennis and I chatted about doing a webinar, and when you listed the topics of things you like to talk about, Alex and I were both intrigued with the evolving journey of the MSP, because that is something we've written blog posts about. I should probably introduce myself. I'm Marnie Stockman from Lifecycle Insights. Sorry, it's Alex Farling of Lifecycle Insights. But the evolving journey of the MSP is absolutely something we talk about all the time. So we are excited to kind of hand it over to you to take us through what you got.
So you want to hear my version of the evolving journey?
Yeah. See, I'm correcting I printed out the blog post and I'll take notes now.
I want to see how wrong I was. Yeah.
Or you can tell me how because I think it's great. We look at it from our perspective of working with MSPs and how they grow over time, and you're working with them at doing a different view. So
Right.
Having different people's view of what the journey is, and actually, that's one of the interesting things about the journey is that it's unique for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Some like processes and paths, but yet unique. So yeah.
Yep. So let's talk about the agenda. We're gonna talk specifically about. We're going to start off by looking at just an MSP and how it changes over time, and then we're going to take more of a macro view of it, and what do we see at the industry level that we're going through. So we'll walk through each one of these points that are here. So let's start with the owner and how it looks. So you guys own a business, right? I've owned a business. The first part is that, you're the guy or the gal, right? And it's just you. And then the first thing you have to do is you go, oh, I can't do this anymore. So you got to hire somebody. So, and in the MSP business, I don't mean this negatively, but a lot of the owners are accidental owners, right? They started off the business knowing that they could do it by themselves and they could do it better than the person they were working for. And then they needed help. And pretty soon they had 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people, right? And it's like, oh, wow, I own a business and now I have to start to manage it. So from that perspective, the owner has to change over time, right? You have to hire your first manager. And when you hire a manager, I think the hardest part is it's a delegation, right? I always look at it and I point up here and I point down here to your heart, right? Right? Because you have to trust in that person. You have to give them the tools. You have to coach them, but not be a friend. And you have
I thought
to
you were pointing to all the hair I tore out trying to train that person. But yeah, I feel like you're telling my story right now. So you're spot on so far.
Okay. The other thing is you have to let them do it their way, right? I always tell people, I says, if I want to drive from, I live in Omaha, if I want to drive from Omaha to Kansas City, which is a 3-hour drive, I know how I want to drive. But, if somebody else wants to drive down a different road and go a different way, that's okay, just as long as we're both in Omaha at the time we're supposed to be there, right? So, that's the mental struggle part of it, right? Then, creating a management team, and we'll talk about how creating a management team affects the financial side of the business in a little bit. But, when is getting the right people? How do I hire external? Do I promote people? We see a lot of our owners having a great technical person and they need a service manager, so they promote them up to be a service manager. And the service manager position, they fail at it, right? Because that's just not who they are. They love being techies. And then how do you then have that conversation to say, hey, you're doing it lousy, right? And do you want to become a technician again? Because I can't keep you in the manager role. So from the owner's perspective, now you have to start to learn how to have that hard conversation, right? There's the book called Critical Conversations that is out there, and it teaches people how to have those conversations. And then ultimately you become, I have it in quotes, a real president, a real CEO, where you're managing the managers, right? And it's funny, some of our bigger guys that are, up in the 10, $20 million for their MSP, they jokingly say that they go to the office and the staff says, "Why are you here?" Right? "You're in my way. You're making decisions." Yeah. "No, you hired us to do this," right? So Alex,
but that's a great compliment, right? As a leader, that's the best compliment, or it should be.
Right. It means you hired the right people too.
And enabled them to, and you got out of the way, right? The bottleneck's no longer at the top of the bottle.
Yeah. I like that saying. Can I steal that?
I use it all the time because I was that bottleneck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, your focus changes over time. So, if you look at it from an owner's perspective, this is, your personal journey, right? Then if we look at personnel, when you're a small MSP, you need technicians who are generalists, right? You need somebody who can work on a firewall, who can work on a PC, reset passwords, whatever it happens to be. You have to have people that are well-rounded. And over time, as you grow, you're then able to allow people to become specialized. So you have somebody that's just focused on being your backup guy. You have somebody else who's your server guy. Somebody else is doing your cloud. Somebody else is doing security. Well, the challenge is that a lot of the guys who are generalists like being generalists, and they don't necessarily like being specialists.
Nobody wants to be the backup guy. That's not any fun.
Right, because you don't do backups all the time, right? And so, that's where we say, sometimes the people who get you here are not the people that are going to get you there, right? And that's not negative. These people, they like to do what they like to do. And so you'll find that sometimes it's hard to get that person to change to be, focused on a particular aspect of the business. And then you go, "Hey, I think, it's time for you to go." Right. And if you keep pushing them down a path that they're uncomfortable with, ultimately they'll see that it's not for them too. And you have to start having that conversation. And then, again, it's when if you start looking at it from a personnel perspective, and we'll talk about sales in a little bit, but and actually sales is next. So let's just pop over to that one. You start talking about when's the right time to hire, a client account manager. And what's that role? When's the right time to go out and hire, somebody who's going to go out and do hunting, right? And that we at Taylor, we have a unique view. We call them owner-led sales. And our philosophy is that the owner is always involved in the sale, right? Because typically businesses buy from businesses. And what you are doing is you're trying to hire people that are going to enable the owner to do this. And the reason you have to do that is there's only so many hours in a day, right? And when you're small, you can be the salesperson and the technician and the guy who's doing payroll. You can do all that. But as you grow, each one of those disciplines needs more time, right? And you only have so much time. And if you start spending more time running the business, you have less time being able to sell. And that's where a lot of the businesses today that come into into Taylor Business Group, they're stuck. They're at $1.5 million or 2 million or 2.5 or 3 million. They can't get past that. And that ceiling is put on because they've reached the maximum amount of time that they can devote to sales.
Yeah. And a lot of them at that size are still doing account management as the owner.
Yep. And so
they're doing internal sales, they're doing account management, they're doing external sales. All of that falls on that human at $1 million, $1.5 million, 2 million. We see regularly that being, something they haven't figured out how to scale yet.
Right. And so we start with the client account manager, and this is where it falls in. We're going to do a a webinar with you guys next week where you're going to talk about the QBR process. And so, this is where, how do we get the owner to stop doing the QBRs, to stop doing the account management, get somebody to come in to do that, get a process in place, work with the client account managers and help them grow, because we think that you should be able to grow your base 10% at a minimum every year just through existing clients and selling, upselling and growing and listening to projects and doing all that type of stuff with your existing clients. And that process is all done through the QBR, which is what you guys are going to teach us how to do next week. So
we know a little something about it.
You think?
I can probably talk for 10 minutes or so.
Okay. And then ultimately, the other thing we have to teach the owner is to think like a salesperson, right? They started off as technicians and they grew. I say they grew innately, right? They walk into a small business owner that's been referred to them. They have the presence. They sit down. They can close the deal, but that's not really selling in the sense of all the stuff that comes ahead of it to get past that ceiling, right? The marketing piece, the making the calls, all that kind of good stuff. So you have to start thinking like a salesman. You have to start making that process go. So that's the piece that we look at from the difference in sales over time. And then ultimately, and we'll talk about this, if everybody's ultimate goal is to exit the business, right? We're all going to exit the business at some time, but you would love to be able to exit the business on your terms with a maximum multiple, right?
Yeah.
And to do that, you have to create a sales engine that's not dependent on you, right? Because people want to buy a business that's operating. You want to take your money and leave, or maybe stick around for a year or two and do what you like to do and have fun in the business. But the buyer is looking for something that they can transition, that they can come into, that will continue to grow. And that sales engine is the basis for you being able to drive higher multiples, if that makes sense. So it's all tied together. Yeah. Then the next thing we look at is from a financial evolution. And Taylor Business Group, we spend a lot of time on the financial piece of the business. We want people to understand their numbers. We realize that people who start a business typically are not numbers people. So how do we make it easy?
Especially not people that started a business fixing tech because they thought it was fun, right?
Right.
That does not typically draw in accountants.
No. Actually, I think I have one MSP where the owner is an accountant.
Wow. Right,
by trade. And him and his partner bought an MSP because they wanted to run it. So they understood the numbers, but everybody else is,
Actually, I knew a guy like that out of DC, I think they were. And they had a large accounting firm. And they just got tired of fixing everybody's QuickBooks problems so that they could do accounting. And so they started an IT company, and the son ran the IT company and the dad ran the accounting company. So
yeah,
you would have been proud of their books, but probably nobody else's.
People start off, I'm going to tell you a story of one of the people that joined 3 years ago. And I had been talking to him for a couple of years ahead of time. He was $1 million, getting to $1.3 million. When he got to about $1.3 million, we were talking, and he was saying, he goes, Dennis, I've lost track of my books. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, we just do cash accounting. I know how much I have in the checkbook at the end of the year. I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month. He goes, but I've lost track of everything else. And I go, oh yeah, that's because you don't have a system, right? Yeah. You don't understand where you're going. So, there's this whole cash versus accrual accounting. What we tell all our people is, you're going to file your income taxes using the cash method, right? But for our purposes, when we're looking at it and comparing it to our benchmarks, you need to be doing accrual method. And what we mean by that is there's the matching principle, right? So, if I sell hardware and I sell it in January and I get paid in February, I don't put the cost of goods sold in January and the cash in February, right? Because it makes your books look bad, right? You do a journal entry and you defer the COGS until February, and then you have the matching to offset the COGS. And so,
Well, and MSPs do the same thing with projects, right? We go sell a big project, we take in a $50,000 check and we just go cash the check and we don't do deferred revenue. And then the books look silly because, we haven't accounted for it, right? It looks like we
right.
had this bang in January, but we have 4 months worth of work ahead of us that we have to pay payroll on and maybe buy some parts and materials for. So yeah, I remember that part of the journey, and I remember my old peer coach coaching us on exactly the same things.
Well, and it's even things like your annual insurance, right? Most insurance policies, you write a $1,200 check and pick a month, and you take that hit in that month, and really it should be $100 a month, right? As an expense, and you just have a journal entry that comes in and do that. So there's that whole process of that, and then there's the process of knowing what good looks like, right? When you're running a business, if I'm making 10% or 5% of profitability, is that good, bad, or indifferent, right? You don't know unless you're doing some type of benchmarking, right? So you have to know what good looks like so that you can then start looking to make the changes in your business to be good, right? And then this next one talks about changes in profitability, and this is what I alluded to before, is that when it's just you and a couple employees, that's when you're going to be most profitable, because you have everybody's providing direct input into the business. As soon as you hire a service manager, or you hire somebody that's an administrative person, they become overhead. And so they're not necessarily adding to the profitability of the business, they're actually deterring it from the business. And so what we find is that, up to about 10 employees, you're highly profitable. Somewhere between 10 and 20, 25 employees, you become less profitable, because that's when you're building out your management team and they're not fully leveraged, right? And then when you get to 20 or 25 employees, you're back to your management team is almost fully leveraged. So you start being, your profitability level goes up again. So being able to manage to that and know what you're doing is extremely important. And knowing that, hey, as I'm making that transition, it's okay if my profitability goes down a little bit, right?
Yep.
So, and then, you have to, what we talk about is you need to start running your business like you're going to sell it tomorrow. Y'all are young, 40-ish, right? You'd love to run your business, well, unless somebody comes along and offers you $100 million, right?
Well, the funny story is, you talk about accidental owners. I was an accidental buyer and seller. So, one day my attorney called me and said, "You're going to sell your business." And I went, "You got to be kidding me." And 45 days later, I didn't own it. So, you have to run it that way so that when the right opportunity comes along, you can take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And I never believed that so much as, 2 years ago when it happened to me.
Yeah. And so we talk about having clean books, and I always use the analogy of, if Alex, if you and I went in for a banking job and you showed up in a gorgeous 3-piece suit, $200 shoes, and you're spot on looking the part, and I pull up in a t-shirt and pair of cutoffs and some flip-flops, we're going for the exact same position. I may be the smartest guy, right? I may be the guy that should get the job, but I will have a lot to overcome based on first impressions, right? if you're going to sell your business and somebody comes in and looks at your books and they're pristine, that's the hardest part of your business to keep clean. And if they see your books are clean and pristine, they're going to think that you run the rest of your business that way. And they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, Mr. Three-Piece suit with a gorgeous tie and nice shoes, and versus me who's got stuff all over the place. And I have receipts in a box that I give to my accountant every month, and he kind of does what he needs to do with them, right? So, you need to run your business. You're going to sell it every day. And then, we provide guidance. So we have a standardized chart of accounts that we're always willing to share with anybody. And if anybody would like to have that, you can just reach out to us and let us know. But it tells you how to put and where to put stuff. And I'll give you one more example, Alex, is that when you started your MSP, where did you put the expense for your PSA tool?
I started, I didn't have a PSA tool, so that's a trick question.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure where we put it when we first bought it. I'm really not sure. I know that within a year of buying it, I had a peer leader who had us breaking it out across 3 departments, and actually splitting that cost up for everyone who was involved in it. So
that's one methodology. We look at it as an admin expense.
Okay. Yeah, we split it across help desk, sales, and admin. Then we managed all 3 of those departments on the P&L.
Yeah,
I'm sure when we first got it, it probably was
a service expense.
I don't know. It very likely was a service expense in the beginning. But we split a lot of those things up. And that was a lot of work. So I probably would have rather put it in as an admin expense.
Right. But I mean, it's thinking about where things go. And the reason that the PSA tool is an admin expense is because you're doing ticketing, you're doing invoicing, which is an administrative expense, and you have your CRM, which is a sales expense, right? Which is why you guys broke it up proportionally.
Yep.
You can do it that way. We found that just everybody in our organization just puts it into admin. So it's apples to apples. Everybody knows that's where it goes. But, we provide that guidance of how to, think about where things need to go. Right.
Yep.
And then, we'll hop over here and we'll talk a little bit about process maturity. So, when you start off as a new MSP, you do things ad hoc, right? You need to install a server, you go install a server. You hire somebody, you say, hey, go install the server. They do it that way. So pretty soon you have Dennis doing it his way, Alex doing it his way, and Marnie doing it her way, right? So then when Alex has to go fix Marnie's, mistakes, he has to understand her thinking process. And so it takes a while to solve a problem, and you're adding time into a ticket because you're not doing it the same way all the time. So you have to start putting processes in place so that everybody does it the same way. We do these 42 steps when we install a server. We do these 107 when we onboard somebody. When we deploy a new whatever, these are the 4 steps we're going to do. We're going to do it in this order all the time. So you have to start creating the process maturity.
Yeah, I mean, the one we talk about regularly to MSPs that it seems like they all forget is sales. It's just another process. You've got a process for everything else where, the sales process is another one that literally should be, hey, here's the steps to walk through the funnel to get from, hey, you're brand new to me, I just met you, Dennis, and I'd like to do business with you, to here's a proposal, sign on the dotted line so that we can work together.
And that's one of the reasons salespeople that are hired fail the most.
Because there's no process there. We just expect them to know how to sell, and we send them out the door. We forget that we have a process for imaging a workstation. We have a process for everything from how to load the coffee machine to how to install a server. And yet we think we just let sales fly by the seat of its pants, and then we wonder why it failed. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And part of that process again goes back to, the documentation, which is part of the QB, which feeds into what you guys do. Yep.
right? And the QBR, how it works, network management. You need to start doing those types of documentation and making sure that everything's in the right place, so that I always looked at it from the perspective when I've worked for all my years, is that I try to document everything because I never know if I'm going to be there tomorrow, right? The proverbial blue bus could come along. Somebody could, offer me $1 million job, whatever the case may be. But you want to always leave it in a better place for the people that follow you than for the.
Well, yeah, and when I take vacation, I want my phone to stop ringing, right? The best thing we ever did, and it was after we adopted IT Glue, that I became an owner who could get away. And it was that brain dump of everything that I had collected over, a decade of running the business, that we had to get out to the team. And we had a big turnover in staff that really, we had staff who was resistant to documentation, and we know it all, we know all the customers, et cetera, and we could always run that way. And we wound up with a big turnover in staff, and that was when we got serious about documentation. But when we got serious about documentation, all of a sudden I could take vacation and my phone stopped ringing.
Yeah.
And I could almost put a pin in a timeline and say it happened right here. And it was documentation that fixed it.
Yeah. So your process maturity also goes all the way back to the, your staffing maturity too, right? How everything changes, and you need to get the right people to make everything happen. So then let's talk about clients. And this is kind of the last part where I'm going to just talk about an MSP's perspective on it. And, when you get started, there's the AFAB, right? Anything for a buck.
I like that acronym. Yeah. Anything for a buck.
Yeah.
I like that you acknowledge that it exists, because I hear way too many coaches say, fire the client. These are the only clients you should do business with. These are the only people you should do business with. And I really appreciate the realism of, at some point in your journey, you have to take the anything for a buck client to keep the doors open, so you can grow into letting that client go find the next guy who needs the anything for the buck client as we move up in maturity and take the next best client.
Yeah. And it's funny, we actually, from our perspective, you're $1 million, $2 million, maybe $3 million before you can seriously stop. The more revenue you get, the more critical you can be in who you bring on.
Right.
But we talk with, and we do our coaching and our owner-led sales. What's right for the guy who's a $400,000 business, right, is not. It's the perfect client for him. But you take $1.5 million business, and it's marginal. You take the $3 million business, and they shouldn't even be looking at it.
They don't want it. Yeah.
Right. And so you have to be realistic about who you are, and the clients have to be right for you. Right. And we one of our coaches who has owned an MSP, he said, when we started off, our targeted client profile was 10 to 15 employees, right? Even though they said 10 to 100. And then it became, they didn't want anybody that was less than 20. And then by the time they got to be a $12 million MSP, they didn't want anybody who was below 40, right? As a new client, right? Yep. And they have some, there was profitability in between. But they then also started looking at it from the perspective of, if I could get somebody new up here and I can grow that little bit, I can take the guy who's less profitable. So you have to start understanding the profitability of your clients, which is hard to find and figure out in some of the PSA tools. Right. And figuring out who they are. And, every year at the end of the year, you should take all your clients and list them out top to bottom, who's most profitable, who's least profitable. And then make a decision on moving forward for the next year. if I can add 2 new clients, I can take these that would replace this, then I can do that, right? And so you can start, that's how you move up the scale some. So, but
Dennis, the only thing I can tell you to that is keep an eye on our social media. We might have something coming that you'll like.
oh, cool.
There
Well, tag me and I'll make
might be
sure
some
I
charting and
comment.
graphing of clients that's coming down the road
I had the
that you
same
might
image in my
appreciate.
head, Alex. So like,
Yeah.
tag Dennis.
Yeah. And it'll be coming really soon.
The other thing that we find is around this is the discussion around verticals. You'll hear people say, oh, you need to focus on a vertical, right? You need to be heavy in financial or manufacturing or whatever. And we semi agree, and it kind of depends on where you live. You know, if you're in New York City, you can be focused on a vertical, right? Because there's
In
enough.
Delaware, that was tougher.
Yeah.
We were a city of 40,000, 10,000 of which were directly assigned to the Air Force Base. So we're essentially a city of 30,000. And, you know, to get to 1 million people, I had to drive an hour.
Mhm.
You know, in New York City, they drive 2 blocks.
Right.
So there's a big difference on how many verticals you can pare down to and how specific you can be. And we had our large scale vertical, you know, we did municipalities, nonprofits, fire departments. We had some that we really fit into well. Our nonprofit vertical was pretty wide. It included private schools. It included all kinds of stuff. But, you know, it made it harder to have that real solid niche.
Right. Yeah, you couldn't just focus on banks, right? And you run out of banks. There's 3 or 4 of them, right? That's as big as you're going to grow. So,
right. And then one buys the other one, and you're done.
Yeah. And then so as we're walking through this, I mean, as you get bigger, you can also then start to refine how you want to sell, right? Where you know, when you're smaller and you're taking everybody on, you may end up with 2 or 3 or 4 backup solutions because you don't have the you know, you don't have the muscle knowledge, the sales knowledge to force everybody into pick a solution. But as you grow, you eventually settle into a solution, right? And at that solution, you can start saying, hey, you know, I'd love to have you as a client, but if you want to do that, you know, I need you to be running on, you know, HP servers, or you need to be in, you know, in the AWS cloud, or you need to be, you know, this type of firewall, or this.
You don't get to keep the firewall you just paid the maintenance on, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
You bought a new firewall 3 weeks ago. Good. That's out the door because we don't use that brand.
I'll help you put it on eBay. Let's get it out of
here. Yeah. So, you know, then that's a maturity again. And so, you know, you just have to realize that over time, you change. And, you know, this is some of these journeys, each one of these journeys that we talked about is unique. And they may take 5-10 years for you to get through. But just know that you have to think that you're going to change all the time, right? You know, I worked with a gentleman who was really smart, and he called it curb jumping. He used to consider that every 18 to 24 months he had to rethink his business, which kind of takes us into the next one where. Kind of taking a look back at where we are in different curb jumps and how long it took, right? You know, I worked for HP Compact for many years, and then I went to work, and when I left there for a large scale VAR, right? We just sold hardware, right? You can make tons of money selling hardware. But you can't do that anymore, right?
Those were the days.
Those were the days. We used to have this saying, that's back when money was free.
The first IT company I ever worked for started as a company that drove to computer shows and bought parts and assembled, you know, IBM clones for customers, and they made $1,000 a machine selling them that way.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
know, those were the days.
Those were the days. Yeah. Then went to break fix, time and material, and build your own. Is that's kind of where we were. That's where everything came from, and they evolved into MSPs. And MSPs have been around for 8-10 years now in varying degrees. Somebody will say they're an MSP, and they'll go, "Yeah, but I just still do break fix." And I said, "What's your recurring revenue compared to your total services revenue?" And it'll be 20%. You go, "Yeah, you got a ways to go." Right. But then, we had the MSSPs, and, from our perspective, none of our members ever successfully transitioned from an MSP to an MSSP. Right. I don't know if you see that out there also. But it's hard to make that transition because it takes more people, right? You go from a service
24/7 operation.
Yep.
And it requires some specialization that most MSPs don't have on the bench.
Yep.
I know of one who has successfully done it, and that's about it. Like I don't know very many.
No, and we don't have anybody in ours who's ever done it. And I heard a number, it was a couple of years ago, that, if you wanted to go 24/7, you needed $1.3 million, $1.4 million just in payroll. That didn't include any toys, right? Any software.
And you can't do this without toys. Let's be honest.
And clearly we need the toys.
We do.
Yeah, you got to have the toys.
But the payroll is the most expensive part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
The humans are the big driving cost.
Yeah.
And then only getting more expensive, right? I mean, I just heard that on average, IT people got a 12% pay raise last year. There's a correction coming as we're short on IT people and those kind of things. Those resources are only going to get more expensive.
Yeah, we had one of our members who's service manager, really good service manager, was making about 150,000, and somebody lured him away at 220. And you go, oh, man, and that was only 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, insane where we're going. And so we're going to wrap it up here with a discussion, kind of look ahead into the crystal ball of what we see. We talk about curve jumping and where everything is going. 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, security was a blip on the radar. If you heard it, it didn't matter. But security is everything now. Alex, you're down at Right a Boom, right?
Yeah.
I honestly tell you that 6 months ago, I didn't know what boom meant.
Right.
Right.
Right. As somebody who thought he kept up with all the toys, like I came down here literally to learn this week. Like I'm a vendor, but I'm here to learn because I know that this industry is moving so fast that even those of us who don't spend our day at the help desk, in the trenches, we still have a lot to learn. Like even though half of my job is consuming content and figuring out where the industry's going and those kind of things, man, there's just so much to learn. So, we sat down as a company and had the conversation and said, does it make sense for us to go to this?
Yeah.
Get smarter. And, that's why we're here. So I'll be sitting in the room with MSPs soaking up the knowledge the same as them because this is fast moving. Security is what it is. It's here to stay and it's going to be at the forefront.
Yeah. And, we have one of the groups I facilitate with, we have our meeting scheduled for March, and we were talking about special topics. So we typically put aside 3 1-hour blocks for the group to just focus on a topic. 2 of them are going to be focused around security. One has spent a lot of time and really researching EDR, right? And so he's going to walk through his journey and his knowledge and what he's done over the last 6 months to get himself in a position to be able to understand what it is and what they need to do. It becomes each group is focusing more and more on security, right? So, that's the first part, is that what was an MSP last year, maybe 18 months ago, is just table stakes now, right?
Help desk services.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a day when we felt like if we went out and bought the next product, we could feel reasonably secure. And it's no longer about just a product or just plugging a hole. It's about configuration of all the products and all the layers of the onion, and making sure that entire security onion is wrapped up nice and tight. And it's way less today about the vendor that you use than it is about how you configure that component, and how you make sure that each of those critical systems is in a configuration that you can secure and support. And that's
Right.
just different from the world that we lived in. I mean, nobody worried about the configuration of a Windows endpoint. Wasn't a thing. We turned the firewall on, we let it go. We slapped some antivirus on it, maybe some next gen anti-malware, and walk away. Right? It was okay.
Yeah.
And those days are gone.
Yeah. So yeah, and you have to learn how the conversation. It's a whole new sales model now too, around that, and pricing, and there's that whole conversation. And we could spend a lot of time just talking about where security is going. But if you're not on the security bandwagon and you're not looking at how security is going to change the MSP world, then you're at the back of the bus. You might not even.
Well, we go right back to that maturity conversation, right? You're essentially, even if you were an MSP 2 years ago, you're headed backwards to being that break fix guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I hadn't thought of looking at that. Second point we have up here is that, managing SaaS applications that are run by your business or run by your clients, by the SMBs. And, there are some great new products coming out there. There's SaaS alerts, right? There's Augment. Those types of solutions, if you're not looking at them, you need to be looking at them, because if everybody, if what we used to do as an MSP was table stakes, and now everybody's going to start doing security, what's going to differentiate you as an MSP is start being able to step up, the level, and start helping them manage their SaaS applications, because everything
and
is
even protecting those SaaS applications, right? Because we protected it when it was on-prem.
Yeah.
They move it to the cloud, or they go spin up something new in the cloud. We still have to find a way to protect it. So those next level tools are about protecting, defending, configuration management, making sure that all of those things have the same two-factor authentication and all the things that we had here, when things were on-prem, when we could protect them.
Right. Well, and again, you have to know that they have them. Right. That's the other thing, because
that's the first trick, right?
The first trick is knowing they have them. So you got to go find them, and then you got to protect them and move forward. And this also changes the conversation. You're starting to now, and instead of talking about technology, you're starting to have business conversations. So it's the maturity model. You have to be able to have those conversations. You have to go in and talk to them. And again, hopefully this is where the guidance of what you guys are doing from a QBR perspective is teaching them that throughout the course of the year, there are times when you need to talk, part of your QBR process, maybe, hey, we fixed this many things, but there's also part of it where you need to have the strategic discussion, and, your tools are going to help them have that conversation, because you're going to teach them that, the speeds and feeds in a QBR of an hour, the speeds and feeds in the last 10 minutes, right? And the first 50 minutes are really strategic business conversations. And your software is going to lead them down that path and allow them to do that, which is going to elevate them up in the eyes of their clients. So, SaaS is the next thing. Where is the RMM going? Right? If I'm not managing endpoints anymore, where does the RMM go? And
I like how everyone smile when you bring that up, because opinions just are like, oh, I got.
If I had my druthers, the answer would be it would go away, but we shall see. Yeah. I actually met an MSP he's young, he's just launched, but he's going straight to Intune and no RMM, no traditional RMM tool. He has remote command and control in Intune, but and there's an interesting conversation too when you talk about, is RMM going away? Well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about remote command and control, which can be identified as a bunch of other things, or are we talking about that traditional self-hosted or vendor-hosted RMM product?
Right. So just, there's a lot of conversations, and there's that this conversation can go many different ways.
We can talk about that one for an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about backup at scale. This is something I was on the cyber call on Monday, and
Love those guys.
and Ryan from Datto was talking about backup at scale, and I hadn't thought of that. And maybe it's not so much backup as restore at scale.
Recovery at scale, right? That was an interesting discussion. I heard that entire discussion, and if you're an MSP with 100 clients, when was the last time you tried to recover all of them at once?
Yeah,
because that's what an RMM breach looks like.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah. And how long it's going to take you? You think, if you look at it, you go, I can get a client up in 2 hours. Oh, that's pretty good. Right. And then you
fast
say,
can you get up 100 clients?
Right.
And don't forget, you have to sleep in there at least 10 times along the way.
200 hours is a lot of days, right?
Yeah.
And at that scale, you're talking 10 days or more, and you may have put people out of business by then.
Yeah. And there's interesting bits all scattered all through that conversation, right? There's a lot that an MSP can do in incident response planning that we just, as an industry, haven't done well.
Yeah.
Right. The top 2% might be doing a good job of it. I would venture that at least 98% of MSPs don't have incident response planning nailed down to where, when they said to a client, hey, we're going to recover into our cloud and infrastructure, your part, right? The clients would go, yeah, we've done it. We've tested it. We know what we're doing. I guess 98% of MSPs, when they go, you know what to do, right? The clients go, yeah, I call you. Yeah. And that's the place where, you really could offload the most hours of your restore just by prepping for it ahead of time, by having walked your client through it, having them know their part and not have to touch every endpoint for them, knowing that some of that's just ready to go. When you spin up that cloud infrastructure, they know how to connect up to it. They know what the next steps are. They know how to move forward.
So is this something that's going to be coming out in a QBR product?
No, I think incident response planning is definitely a separate thing, but it's literally a checkbox today that we run on most of our risk assessments. As we start talking about risk, do you have a real incident response plan? Have you run it in a reasonable time frame with your clients? And did you have a positive result, or were you unsuccessful? And if you can't say, not only do we have it, but my client knows they're part of it, and everybody's capable of running their part with high levels of success, we're not ready.
Yeah, and when I was making that comment, I was thinking these would just be questions that are part of the normal QBR, right? That you could start to add into what you're prompting me as an MSP to ask my clients about, or at least be thinking about.
We've got clients asking upwards of 20 questions on policy, procedure, process, those kind of things. Above and beyond, hey, do they have my antivirus? Do they have my firewall? That's the least of our worries. We're back to table stakes at that point.
Yeah.
There's a bigger strategic discussion that's got to be happening, or again, you're going to have these kind of problems.
Yeah. And then, I know we're getting close on time. So, a cloud is another one that we could spend hours talking about. That ties back into security. It ties back into the SaaS questions ties back into the RMM discussion, and back up again. Restore at scale. So all these different things put together. The cloud is out there also. So hopefully, this discussion has helped people who are in the MSP arena understand that we're transitioning, and we're transitioning faster all the time. What used to be a 2-year transition, I think now is 18 to 12-month transition of where you need to be thinking, and it's going to continue to go like that. And when we start talking about curve jumping, you're running your business one way and you're going to run your business a different way. And that jump from where you are today to where you need to be, those curves are getting, amplitude is getting higher, and the time frame is getting shorter.
The only thing that stays the same in technology is that it changes every day, right? Yeah. We keep saying the MSP is going to be reinvented, and I think it's been reinvented every year for the last 15 years. But it's one of those things where we just have to stay up to speed. We have to stay up to date. I think every year we always say it's no more important. It's never been more important that we stay up to date. I think MSPs are used to constant change, and that the only thing constant is change. But now the focus is on cybersecurity. The seasoned ones know what they're doing. They know where they're going. They're paying attention. They're watching. The new guys are hitting the ground running, and there's a big group in the middle that, I mean, honestly, is prospects for you. That and I'm going to kind of say my last couple of words as we run up on time with. One of the biggest changes at my MSP was when we joined a peer group, and I was not a Taylor Business Group member. I joined another peer group out there, but just the ability to have some accountability as an owner, the benefit of the herd mentality, or at least the herd thought process. Having that board of directors of 10 other MSPs that held you accountable and called you on your BS and your head trash. It was monumental for the growth of my MSP. It certainly changed us, and I think we did it even smaller than most MSPs could get away with. We joined our first peer group at, I think we were $350,000 a year, so we did it really early before most peer companies want to talk to an MSP. But it was the best thing we ever did. As a leader, it taught me a lot. As a punk kid that was running a business that needed to grow up, it gave me some structure and some things that I needed. So. My final thought is just that with security being what it is, if you don't feel like you have it dialed in and you know where you're going, consider a peer group, because it's the one thing that wasn't on any of your slides today that I think is just a huge impact. Oh, here we go. It's on another slide. It has a huge impact on MSPs, and it really enables them the power of multiple CEOs in the room having those conversations.
Yeah. So, if you're interested in Taylor Business Group, this is not, our conversation is not a sales pitch, but we'll waive your onboarding fee, and it's $400 a month, and we'll change the trajectory of your business. And like we talked about the conversation, when this one gentleman has spent 6 months really understanding his EDR solutions, and he's going to teach everybody else in the group that, right? So 10 people are going to get the benefit of one guy's hard work.
That's fantastic.
And if you're just a 5 or 6 or 7 man MSP, you just can't dedicate that much time to that.
Yeah. And we have, to your point, Alex, I think our smallest member is about 350,000. Our largest member is about 25 million. So, anywhere in that stack that you come along, we're here to help you.
But there's a lot of plateaus between 355 and 25 million. So, there's an email address typo in there. Oh
yeah, it is. Oh man, how do you do that?
I'll put it in the chat.
We can put it in the chat, yeah. But if you feel like you're on any of those plateaus between 350 and 25 million, like, that's the opportunity to talk to a peer group. We plateaued right at about 350,000, and it was why we did it. I didn't know what the next step looked like. I wasn't able to figure it out myself, and I just needed a couple guys to give me a kick in the butt. And I got that from a peer group.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for your encouragement, Alex. I want to thank you and Marnie for hosting us today. It's been a pleasure.
We've recorded it, and we'll get it out, to the folks who registered and weren't able to make it, because I think there were a few.
Yep.
And definitely continue to spread the word.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. Enjoy Right of Boom, Alex. Don't let boom hit you.
Let's hope not. Cross the fingers.
Perfect. Yeah. See Michael there. That's awesome. Thanks all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Nice. Look for me, Michael. I'll be here.